of the Orono County. Joining me here in council chambers are Councilor Wingard, Councilor Robertson, Councilor Grenier, and Councilor Gardner is joining us via Zoom. So we have a full agenda tonight, so we'll move right along. Agenda review. Are there any changes in the agenda? No changes. Approval of the minutes of November 8th, 2021. A motion to approve, please. Any second? Any additions, corrections? Never are. Rarely are. In that case, Nancy, you do a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Berry,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson, in favor, Councilor Grenier,
In favor.
Councilor Wingard,
In favor.
and the vote is 5 in favor and 1 opposed.
Thank you. Public hearings, public hearing A to consider an ordinance amendment to the Town of Orono Ordinances, Chapter 18, Land Use, Section 18-153, marijuana establishments, Section 18-105, Schedule of Uses, and Section 18-31, definitions, to amend zoning and performance standards for marijuana establishments. And I believe that's going to be Kyle.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So this is the ordinance amendment that primarily dealt with the moratorium that we had in place for marijuana retail stores located on Park Street, the C2 area. Went through several council committee meetings and planning board public hearing now. Primarily, the idea of the amendment was to resolve some complications. The idea of having marijuana retail stores in close proximity to different sensitive uses on the Park Street corridor. So the main objective of it was to not allow marijuana retail stores as a use in the C2 district, leaving them just to be allowable in the C1. In addition to that change, there were a few other sort of minor clarifications made throughout the ordinance and a few adjustments in terms of cultivation facilities, matching the sort of allowance for small scale marijuana cultivation facilities that we had in the forest and agriculture, allowing that to happen in the low density residential district as well, just for some consistency there, and also adopting some standards for marijuana nurseries, which the original ordinance language didn't count for. So just clean that up a bit. Other than that, there weren't too many comments from the planning board as far as recommendations to change the draft amendment, and there were no public comments at that meeting as we discussed with the committee. So right now we're looking to move forward with the adoption process to bring the amendment forward.
Thank you, Kyle. As you mentioned, we've discussed this several times in committee and it's been to the planning board with their public hearing. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this bill?
I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you. Any comment from council members? We will close public hearing A and move on to public hearing B. To consider an ordinance amendment to the Town of Orono Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Fire Prevention and Protection.
That's me.
Yes.
This is, I hazard to say, a housekeeping matter because that always seems to get us in trouble. But when we restructured our public safety management to include a public safety director and a deputy fire chief, we look back at the ordinance, and the ordinance says fire chief all over it. And so the primary purpose of this ordinance is to clean that up, to make it clear that by fire chief, what we really mean is chief fire official. Right now, our public safety director serves as the chief fire official, but this gives us the flexibility to change that as structure may change in the future, we won't have to go back in and change the ordinance. The only other thing that we did within this ordinance is, I'm not sure why, but this ordinance talked about the fire captain, which within our structure and the way we've delegated authorities, job titles like that are really the authority of management as opposed to ordinance driven. And quite honestly, this did not reflect our current operation. So Chief and I are recommending that we take that out. So it is just, that's section 1433 is just being removed.
Thank you, Sophie. Again, it's a public hearing, so any comments from the public, people would raise their hand to indicate a comment. You see any? No?
Nope, not at this time.
Thank you. Anything from council? Then we will close public hearing B and move on to public hearing C, to consider amendments to the town of Orono charter. And I suspect that is our town manager again.
It sure does. It sure is. We've talked about this a couple of times. The town charter is very specific that the annual municipal election will be held on the second Tuesday of March. Period. The end. So when the state calls state or federal elections to be held in March, we're faced with having to run multiple elections at the same time. And while my staff is amazing and can absolutely do that, it creates a lot of confusion and requires people at times to come in multiple times to vote. So we wanted to give the council the authority to have some discretion of when the annual town municipal election would be held. And what this ordinance, what this charter amendment would do is simply give you the authority, if you chose, to move the annual municipal election date from the second Tuesday in March to the date of a state or federal election that was held within 30 days of the annual of the second Tuesday in March. Then the other change in the charter that we're suggesting is that the inauguration, or as we call it, the swearing in of both RSU and town council newly elected public officials is normally held on the third Monday of March. Well, if we have the ability to move the election, you should probably have the ability to change when people are sworn in. So this would simply change this to the Monday immediately following the election. With any charter amendment, this is a legally required public hearing. The question that council will talk about later on in the agenda is whether or not you wish to put this on the ballot for the annual municipal election, which is happening the second Tuesday of March. But it becomes a referendum question for the voters.
Thank you, Sophie. Once again, are there any comments from the public on this proposed charter amendment? Nothing from Bell. I'm assuming there are none.
There are none.
I will close public hearing C and move on to acknowledgements by council members. And we'll start over here with Jeff.
We have fortunately very few incidents that require fire and public safety to respond in the in-town areas, but yesterday and last night we had one, and I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of the Orono Fire Department and the quick response, and also the cooperation that we received from the American Red Cross to help the individuals displaced.
Thank you. Carol.
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge a community member, Emily Hasbrook. She's putting together a holiday gift giving for families who are, for children of families who are in need of support this season. And she has everything she needs. She put a notice out on her parent listserv, and the community has responded as the community typically does. So I just want to say thank you to the people who helped Emily out, and thank you to Emily for arranging for gifts for children whose families need some support this Christmas or this holiday season, I should say.
Laura?
I just want to thank all of the businesses and the volunteers who put up lights on the river trail at Orono. It's beautiful. It's populated by people from our town and people coming to our town specifically to enjoy the lights, and it makes one great. Thanks to all the people who made it happen, including the town staff that put lights down in the parking lot and along to the all the way along the trail to make the other lot available this year.
Thank you. Barry?
I kind of want to echo what Jeff said, but to also put out there, I'm also one of the board members for Northern New England Red Cross. So if anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out to me and go from there. I know we're going to talk about this in consent or in part of the consent agenda, but I wanted to recognize all the people who are going to be celebrating anniversaries this year, and specifically Sophie for your 10 years here.
Thank you.
And Nancy.
Yeah, I was just gonna pick up on that, and we have a 20-year
That's right.
employee, and
I was gonna
congratulations,
say that to you,
Nancy
so you
Ward.
can sit next to me.
Megan?
Yes, I live very close to the holiday lights extravaganza, and it's exciting to see how many folks are turning out for that. I will say, quick note to folks who are driving from out of town, the no parking signs on the side of the road, you don't want to park on top of those. That's not how those signs work. That's not how those signs work. Yes. So the other thing that I want to mention tonight is, every year except, well, obviously COVID made some things impossible last year, but every year is the annual employee appreciation luncheon, and it's coming up this week. And so that is a private time for staff to be recognized and honored, but I just wanted to also recognize and honor them on the record in front of the public for all of their excellent work this year. And I really look forward to the banquet again this year.
Great. Thanks. Couple of acknowledgements from me. On a sad note, I'd like to acknowledge the passing of Kent Smith, a longtime Orono resident who passed away since our last meeting. I join other council members in recognizing our employees. We often hear about how difficult it is to fill certain positions in town. It's nice to recognize folks who have been here for a period of time. We're recognizing the 5-year anniversary, the 10-year anniversary, the 15-year anniversary, the 20-year anniversary, and for one of our firefighters, the 25th year anniversary, and that's very impressive. I'd also like to recognize Laura Mitchell, who served briefly on the town council, and I think contributed some real passion for certain issues, and was a great help during the DIE committee activity, and we are going to miss her. And that concludes our acknowledgements, and we will move on to unfinished business, which I don't believe we have any. And then we have the consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Move approval. And a second, please.
Second.
Is there any comment on that? Then please take a vote on the consent agenda, Nancy.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner. In favor. Council Robinson,
In favor.
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Greenwood,
In favor.
Council Lindbergh,
In favor.
and the vote is 6 in favor and none opposed.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. Order 21-226. Order pursuant to 30-A AMRSA, Section 2104. The municipal officers of the town of Orono hereby directed the town clerk to update the following articles on the municipal election warrant to be voted on March 8, 2022. And I believe that's Sophie.
That is,
Motion?
Motion to approve, please. Thank you.
Move approval.
And a second. Second.
so this is exactly what we talked about in public hearing. Would you like me to repeat, or are you okay?
I don't think we need
If
to
anybody has
repeat it.
any
It's the very
questions,
same
I'm here to answer.
material. Any questions? Any comments? None, so let's take a roll call vote, please, Nancy.
Council Perry?
In favor?
Council Gardner?
In favor?
Council Osher? In favor. Council Robinson?
In favor.
Councilor Greener?
In favor.
Council Windor?
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Thank you. Order 21-227, order adopting an updated change to the Town Council Environment Committee. We discussed this at our last workshop, and you received an updated copy in your packet.
Would you like?
Motion, please.
Move approval.
Second. Cheryl?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you like me to
Sure.
quickly review it? So the town council last year established an ad hoc environment committee and gave that committee a pretty tight charge and a time-limited establishment. As part of our conversations earlier this year, town council agreed that the environment committee was doing great work and actually moving forward some really important initiatives and helping staff immensely. And decided that we should look at creating a more formal charge. So the environment committee is a little bit different than the other town council committees in that all the rest of our committees are simply committees of town council that the town manager staffs. The environment committee has some counselors on it. Councilor Robertson chairs the committee. Councilor Wingard is a new member. The town manager or the assistant town manager designated, which we have designated Bell to support this particular committee. And then to round out the committee, because two people, while they can get a lot done, need some help. Councilor Robertson and the council actually identified 5 resident, what do we call them? Volunteer resident experts. These are folks who clearly have technical expertise in environmental issues. They meet. If you look, the way we want to structure this committee is to not formally appoint them. And the reason for that is these are incredibly busy people who seem content to join via Zoom and help counselors and staff work through issues. If we formally appoint them to the committee, when the pandemic, you notice I say when, not if, the pandemic is over, they would have to come to physically come to town council chamber for meetings. And we're just not seeing that as, we see that as a barrier to future participation. So the new committee charge, you have it. This is an advisory committee. So this committee advises staff and advises town council. They may identify community initiatives, which then they can spin out in the community. They are going to help us with our regional climate adaptation and resilience planning efforts, which right now the town of Orono is a leader in this region with the city of Bangor and the transportation planning group. And they're also going to evaluate legislation so that we can really get a sense of what pending legislation will, how that impacts Orono and impacts our climate planning actions. And most importantly, when staff has an environmental issue in front of us, we have a place to take it with experts, which is really important for us. That is the charge. The idea is that this is not a time limited charge. You know, if in the future you want to change it again, you'd look at another charge.
Any questions or comments? We are incredibly fortunate to have the experts volunteer their time and council members who will take on additional responsibilities.
Yes, and I'm hoping that our new environmental person, I'm not sure the title.
We have an environmental services coordinator.
There we go. Environmental Services Coordinator, Megan, and I had a chance to meet her. And she will also, hoping, be contributing. She's
So-
available.
When we look at structure,
Yeah,
because of the way the organization is run, I end up being or my designee ends up being the person, but I think Bell too is looking forward to having a partner.
we
on that.
can't lose a Bell.
No,
Did you hear that, Bell? You're not going anywhere. Yes.
Any other comments or questions on this item? If not, let's do a roll call vote. Nancy, please.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osha,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Greenyer,
In favor.
Council Windback.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're none opposed.
Thank you. Order 21-228. Order approving ordinance amendments to the Town of Orono Ordinances, Chapter 8, Article 4, rental unit registration, Section 8-110 through 8-117. And Kyle, I suspect you're handling this again.
Yes. So this rental registration ordinance amendment has gone through planning board and council public hearings now up for adoption. Just to recap, the primary purpose of the amendment was to achieve one of the recommendations of the comprehensive plan to require a local agent for rental properties in which there's an absentee owner, as it's defined in the ordinance, to sort of encourage some more efficient response in those non-owner occupied rental properties. In addition to that, it sort of attempted to clean up the amendment as a whole as far as what information was really required as part of the rental registration, what information we really needed to keep accurate and the necessary data for record keeping. And it just clarified a few things like cross-referencing the definition of family, which relates to the number of unrelated people allowed in rental units. So overall, it's really cleaning up the ordinance and adding in that provision for local agents. Instead, it's been through all the public hearing processes and now it's ready for a vote for adoption.
So let's have a motion to approve, please, which I should have asked for initially.
Move approval.
And a second.
Second.
And we have any comments or questions for Kyle on regard to this? We've talked about it several times. No questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Yes.
I'm a short timer on the council. I realize that whatever I say won't have any longevity because probably no one else will feel this way. And I've been on the council for years and I've never said it out loud because I didn't think anyone would hear it. But I'm going to say it now, which is the whole concept, and I know it's done all over the state, of deciding who's a family and how many of those people can live together by law and then making it illegal, I think is, I think it's unfair to individuals. I think that it just strikes me as wrong. I think that we have many problems with people in rental properties, but those problems are not related to whether or not they by law are related by law or by blood are related. Those problems are related to how they manage the property that they're living in, and in the case of their trash or their noise, and I understand that that's embedded into law and ordinances in our state about how we deal with people in rental properties, but I think it's fundamentally unacceptable because as a lesbian, I lived for many years where I was not considered legally married to my partner, even though we were actually married by a rabbi. People came, we had a party like everyone else. It wasn't legal. And so if I lived in a house with my ex-partner before it was legal, that would not be considered legal. And if people had a problem with how we kept our trash or how loud we were, I can understand why they would complain. But the idea that the law gets to decide who is a family and who gets to live somewhere together and whether there's, and how about families, especially in poor communities, that don't have the money to get dollars for lawyers, they might take in children and that don't have a home because they've been kicked out because they're gay. And those kids live in the house and then they are actually not legally family until some other point in time. So as a lesbian who's lived in a world that doesn't recognize our families and our families of choice, and then we become targets because people are uncomfortable with us, then focus on our behavior. And we might be the ones that, and this would be the same for people of color, people who are Black in a white neighborhood, people who are Hispanic in the neighborhood where no one else is Hispanic. And so I have a fundamental problem with what you just tossed off, which is we have these rules about how many people are legally allowed to be in a house. And so I just think it's fundamentally wrong.
Any other comments? Ready for vote? Nancy, roll call vote, please.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osha,
Abstain.
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor.
Council Windar.
In favor.
And there are 5 in favor and none opposed and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Nancy. Order 21-229, order approving ordinance amendment to the Town of Orono Ordinances, Chapter 14, Fire Protection and Prevention. Motion to approve, please.
Approve.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. Sophie, this is what we discussed earlier in our public hearing.
This is exactly what we discussed.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Nancy,
Council Perry,
in favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osha,
Favor.
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor.
Council Windar,
In favor.
and the vote is 6 in favor and there are none opposed.
And order 21-230, order authorizing the town manager to purchase a 30 C series book return system from Kingsley Library Returns and Equipment of Ontario, Canada. Canada or California?
California.
California. In an amount not to exceed $5,000 with funds drawn from the library construction account.
I move approval.
And second.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Lori Carpenter, our library director, is here to talk about this. And if you have questions about money, I can absolutely
All
answer
right,
those.
Lori,
Hey,
you're on.
thanks. Thank you. So we are looking to replace a book drop that is at least 15 years old. It came to Pine Street even before the library was built. So we've been using that book drop for 15 years. We've been milking it along for the past few years. The Maine weather has taken its toll on the locks and the wheels. So oftentimes it's a volunteer who's using this book drop, emptying it out each day, and getting a new one will make their life easier. And hopefully this lasts at least another 15 years. So I'll take questions or concerns, thoughts.
Any questions?
I'm curious, is this the same size or is it a bit bigger? Is it?
It's the same size. It's a bit taller. We're just limited with the space that we have. I did look to get one that had kind of a dual drop, one for books and one for media, DVDs and whatnot, but it was much too wide to fit in the space that we have. We could have put it in front of one of the window that we use for a walk-up window, but we may need to use that again in the future. One thing that I did do is I got one that could be a drive-up book drop. So in the future, if we're ever to have a different type of book drop, I'm looking at possibly a interior one where books can be dropped into a slot in the wall, we could move this to the curb to use as a drive-up book drop.
Any other questions?
So I
You were
just,
going to talk about how to pay for this, I believe.
that's always my job.
Yes.
So we have the very end of the library construction account, which we should, it has been a priority for us to use these funds. These funds were borrowed for the library and we can't hold on to them forever. So currently that account has a balance of $12,147. This would reduce that, but still leave us enough if we came up with another project or two.
Good. Anything else on this item? Any other question or comment? Then Nancy, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Perry,
In favor?
Counselor Gardner,
In favor?
Counselor Oshner,
In favor?
Counselor Robertson,
In favor.
Counselor Grenier,
In favor.
and Counselor Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and there are none opposed.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I have lost my page.
Page 7.
Lord knows.
This is where we are.
Okay. So we are finished with our new business and ready to go on to council committee and representative reports. Thank you. On committee reports, I'll start with the Finance Committee. We met last week. We had a very informative presentation on a wage comparison for employees, which we're taking under advisement. And we also agreed to use some of our FERPA money to purchase an item which is called a
Lucas chest compression system.
And we approved that. Other committee reports? Carrie?
Community development, we talked about the charge tonight for the environmental committee. And then we also had a discussion together and collectively agreed on the new look for our gateway signs and then going from there. So it will be the maroon border.
Megan, did you have anything for us today?
So the last meeting, comprehensive plan did not have anything, but I think well, on November 22nd, that wouldn't have been mentioned yet in a council meeting. The comprehensive plan implementation committee discussed the ordinance revisions related to the disorderly properties, unruly gatherings, and fee for police services for large events. And I think that's it.
Would Councilor Gardner like to just give a brief update, perhaps with Councilor Wingard, about the Webster neighborhood meeting that council asked
Excellent.
for?
Yes, definitely. So Councilor Wingard and I were present last Wednesday night to listen to a very, very well facilitated, Chief Lowe did an excellent job facilitating a neighborhood meeting for the Webster side neighborhood. That was really productive. Folks got a chance to point out some of their key concerns and kind of work through them a bit, categorize things, group things in such a way that the appropriate departments can dig a little deeper into some of those issues and see what might be going on there. It was just a really productive time, and it was you know, it was good to sit as a counselor. It was good to sit there and just listen to folks' concerns. So yeah, so the process continues on that one. Jeff, did you have anything to add?
Not really. I agree. It was, Chief did a great job facilitating the meeting. We had 31 residents in this room plus staff, and that was awesome to see and hear all those voices. And I appreciated at the end of the meeting, people shared not only their sort of the negative issues they were having, but why they really enjoyed the quality of life in Webster neighborhood. And that was great to hear as well.
And I understand there were some landlords present as well.
Yes, Yes, at least 3, possibly more, and it's great to have that dialogue.
That's great. Thank you for organizing that, town manager. Cheryl, would you have
Yep,
something?
and so the Environment Committee met on November 17th. We had a presentation by committee member Adriana Cavalcanti. She presented an idea to the committee about recycling of plastic, number 3 through 7, that's currently going into our waste stream. The suggestion was to use Monson, the town of Monson, as a model town that has purchased a machine to melt unrecyclable plastic and convert it into strips for either 3D printers or to make a composite that is used for building things like park benches for the town. It was an idea that we discussed. We also had a discussion and a preliminary proposal that will be presented to council prior to the 2023 budget considerations for a weatherized Orono campaign that we can support. So all community members can participate in reducing methane emissions and easing off fossil fuels. And we have no meeting in December.
Well, there. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't know if you wanted to just talk briefly as the chair of the Environment Committee, you represented the town of Orono since our last.
Yes, they forced me out from behind the scenes. So we had, it was the 6th, I think, December 6th. I got a chance to meet with the governor and Hannah Pingree and Kathy Conlow, our town managers were there, University of Maine, to kind of represent the partnership between Orono and Bangor and University of Maine Hudson that we are currently in process of. And they're working, the upper level staff is working behind the scenes also and getting things rolling and backs. And so I got a chance to say a few words and it was fun.
I watched it on YouTube and I thought you did an excellent job.
Thank you so much. It's not my, I prefer to be behind the scenes. I'm called to do my service. I will do it.
Okay, ready to move on?
I have one
Oh,
more, I have
yes,
an update.
please.
So I'm still serving on the Maine Natural Resources Conservation Program panel that reviews proposals, and we'll have our winter planning meeting in January where we're going to evaluate the compensation planning framework. So that's how much funding needs to go in when people develop wetlands and disturb them, and then they have to pay into this fee, this pool that we then distribute. We're also going to be discussing forestry on the parcels. So right now, it actually says, if you're going to manage the parcels for forestry, then you cannot get funding from this. And I and one other person suggested that there are ways to manage forests. So it says, if you're managing the forest, not if you're managing it for timber. So what I pointed out is forests can be managed for timber, and maybe we don't want to do that in a place where we're doing habitat preservation. But forests can also be managed for what my new bill is and my law in the legislature, which is to store organic matter. And that's good for the climate because plants pull CO2 out of the atmosphere and they store it below ground as organic matter. So it helps mitigate climate change if you were to manage for it. And so we're going to have a discussion about this, changing the vocabulary to say that we don't want to give money to places that are going to manage to cut the trees down, but we might be willing to give the money to people who manage wetland forests for other goals besides habitat. So, so that's what's happening in January.
Thank you. Very interesting. Future agenda items. Any future agenda items that council members have? Public petitions, we have none. Public comments, do we have anybody in the public that wants to comment?
I don't see any hands raised.
Then item 13 is executive session. Could I have a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA paragraph 405 6C for for a discussion related to a proposed economic development project. Motion, please. And second?
Second.
Seconded. Have a roll call vote on that, please. I will, before that, I would like to say that there'll be no formal business at the conclusion of the executive session. And we will just be adjourning when we conclude. We'll come out of executive session and then adjourn. So Nancy,
Council Perry,
in favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osha,
Favor.
Council Robinson,
In favor.
Council Greener,
In favor?
Council Wingard. And the vote is 6 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. So we have some folks.
Yeah, what, I think what we're looking to do right now is for Bell to end this meeting and open the executive session meeting.
Yes, and are you going to log in on the big
Log in as
screen?
Me, right?
So, all right, I will see you guys on the next meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Belle.